Welcome back. If you don't use a wheelchair to get around, this might not seem like a big deal, but for those who rely on wheelchairs every day, when one breaks, it's a significant problem. In this year's legislative session, lawmakers passed a law requiring repairs to be made quickly for broken wheelchairs. State Senator Seminara is one of the people who pushed for that law, and she joins me now in the studio. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I said this to you when you sat down. This is one of those things where if it's important to you, it's really, 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 really important. And if it's not, you might not even know it exists. Is that part of the issue in getting a bill like this passed, that this isn't something that everyone in the supermarket's talking about?
It is definitely not something that everybody in the supermarket is talking about, but it affects a small segment in the population.
Sure.
But the population that it affects it really affects them, and it affects them hard. It's for the rest of us, like not having your car or not having your legs.
Sure.
So
tell us what the problem was. We'll talk about the law, but I want to talk about the problem it was designed to address. So what would happen before this law? Like, what was the delay we're talking about?
So the delays varied. We spent a lot of time talking about why the delays happened, but the delays varied in terms of time. It was anywhere from I was waiting a month to I was waiting over a year for my wheelchair to be repaired. So there was a huge disparity between how long people were waiting. But again, if you're talking about not having your legs for a month, all sorts of things can happen. Like, you can develop medical issues. You're not getting to work. You're not even out socially like you and I would be on a regular basis. So it was a huge issue for people.
Now, we're talking motorized wheelchairs?
Yes.
And power chairs. And what are the kinds of things that could happen? I mean, are there repairs, maybe just like a car, a small repair that you can keep using it and you need a repair, and then some where you're just completely out of gas?
Exactly. That's the gamut. So there are some that it would just be a small repair and they might be able to still use their wheelchair. And very often some wheelchair owners actually have spare chairs that they've either outgrown, or I wouldn't say outgrown, but they became outdated, or they needed a replacement, but they keep their old one just in case when something like this happens. But it was getting to the point where, again, the majority of people were saying we're not getting timely repairs on our wheelchairs.
And so what does this law do to change that?
So the law actually puts in place that a wheelchair needs to be repaired within a 10-day period once the parts are available and once the consumer makes their chair available. That's the first thing it does. It also sets up a complaint line with the Department of Consumer Protection, along with a healthcare advocate, so that people have a place where they can call and they can lodge a complaint. Now, we're gonna get data on that complaint in the future, so that's another thing it does. It also gets rid of prior authorizations and prescriptions for repairs. And I stress for repairs because these complex chairs are really very expensive. They run the gamut from $20,000 to $60,000. So depending on how intense somebody's needs are, they become more and more complex. We're always going to require or need a prescription and a prior authorization from an insurance, whether that's Medicare, Medicaid, or private. But by taking that away, it lessens the time, because what we found in the task force that I sat on for about a year was the prior authorization and that prescription process. Doctors rarely didn't write a prescription, and insurances rarely denied people their wheelchair.
But you had to chase the paperwork in the meantime.
Right. So we shaved off like a week.
Which is a big deal.
Right, which is a big deal by getting rid of that. So the law got rid of that as well. We also said that the industry had to set up a phone line in which people could request a repair, and they had to show that they offered or that they ordered the parts within 3 days.
Okay.
And then we set up an ongoing task force to continue to monitor the progress, and then they have to report back to the Human Services Committee, which is where I sit.
Now, the task force, actually, I saw that in the release, and so often, you know, whether it's new journalists or the viewers at home hear task force and they go, yeah, sure, you're working on something. This seems like it was a great outcome from people who really cared and it worked on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, all stakeholders were involved, and what I mean by that, there were consumers, there were legislators, the industry was involved, and I don't want to minimize the industry part. They recognized that they were not hitting the mark and that they were not doing what they should be doing. So they were wholeheartedly at the table admitting that we have a problem and we need to address it. So I was happy, and task force, from what I understand, they typically meet like once a month. We were meeting weekly.
Wow.
There was so much to talk about and so much to uncover and we had a great person who was leading our task force, Beverly Brakeman, I'll just say her name. She was awesome, and we really came together as a group. So.
Great. Tell me about the people who rely on the chairs. I know you said your daughter relies on a chair, and that's part of why this is so important to you. Is this a big deal? Is it welcomed by that community?
Absolutely. When we had the bill signing up at the Capitol, when the governor came, there were probably 80 wheelchair users in that room, and very welcomed and happy. This is landmark legislation. There are not other states that have a wheelchair bill. So I'm sure there'll be other states that'll be looking at this legislation and maybe taking some parts of it and adopting it maybe in their own states. And we're not done yet.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you. We have about a minute left, but there's more to do, because one thing that was in the bill till the end was a financial penalty if you don't meet the guidelines. That went away. Some other things went away. So you're going to look at that data you talked about and see what's next?
Exactly. So we set up the legislation so that the industry and DCP and the others involved have to report to us in January, right when the session begins. And we have now given the industry 6 months or so to get up to snuff, to alleviate their wait list, and then also address the problems that come in on a regular basis. So we're going to look at that data. If they haven't caught up and they're not doing what they're supposed to do, we're going to have to make some legislative changes and some updates to the current legislation. That's going to have some teeth in it.
There you go. You just put them on notice right there on our show. We appreciate you being with us. It is a big deal for everybody, but certainly for those who rely on it. Thank you for being with us on the show, and we hope to have you back in soon.
I hope to be back in soon.